Well, first up, the big story, US-Iran tensions in West Asia seem to have reached a tipping point. Iran's top general, Qasem Soleimani, has been killed by the United States in a rocket strike near the Baghdad airport. The entire region is on the edge. The fallout from this high-profile assassination can already be seen. The US Embassy in Iraq has urged all American citizens to leave the country immediately. They have been asked to depart via air or land. The embassy is on high alert, expecting a hostile reaction to the strikes. France has asked its citizens in Iran to stay away from public gatherings and refrain from taking photographs in public. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei has declared 3 days of mourning over Soleimani's death and vowed to exact severe revenge from the US. He has said that the killing will double the motivation of the countrymen's resistance against the US. Iran has also summoned the Swiss envoy and expressed displeasure over the killing of Qassem Soleimani. Switzerland, remember, represents the US interests in Iran. And President Rouhani has said that Iran and the free nations will avenge the death of Soleimani. He said Iran is more determined to resist the United States after the killing. Tehran's top security body has called for an urgent meeting to take stock of the current situation. Soleimani was one of the most powerful men in Iran, and there are already indications that his death will not go unavenged. A White House statement said that the strike was ordered by President Trump as a defensive act to protect the lives of American personnel abroad. The Quds Force, headed by Soleimani, is in fact a US-designated foreign terrorist organization. The US has accused Soleimani of plotting attacks on American diplomats and service members deployed across Iraq. 3 Katyusha rockets were fired at a convoy of cars near the airport shortly after midnight. The pro-Iranian Shia militant group Popular Mobilization Forces confirmed that 5 of its members and 2 special guests were killed in the strike. Now, caught in the crossfire between Iran and the United States is Iraq. Keep in mind that Soleimani was killed by the United States on Iraqi soil. And listen in to some Iraqi protesters reacting to the killing of General Soleimani.
أمريكا وإيران يحلون مشاكلهم خارج العراق، ما ردهم يحلونها داخل العراق، لأن هذا الشيء مو مصالح. يقولون لنا على أساس نحتفل بساحة التحرير، لا ما نحتفل بمقتل سليمان ومقتل غيره ومقتل غيره، لا ما نحتفل، لأن هذا كله مو مصالحنا.
In some places in Baghdad, people took out celebrations to mark the killing of Soleimani. It must be said, however, that the feeling across the country is not the same. The government in Iraq has, in fact, condemned the strikes as a violation of the security agreement with the US. The other high-profile casualty in the strike was the deputy commander of the PMF, Abu Mehdi al-Muhandis. The funeral for the militiamen killed in the airstrike will be held on Saturday. Meanwhile, a prayer gathering was held in Tehran in memory of General Soleimani. Hundreds of emotional Iranian citizens gathered to pay their respects to him. And well, Maral Golampur, journalist, is joining us live now from Tehran for the latest on this. And Maral, thanks very much for talking to us. Let me first begin by asking you about the unprecedented protests now that are taking place in Iran. Thousands of people coming out in support of General Soleimani. And what are the expected consequences of this killing?
Hello, Tehran. Well, as you know, Qassem Soleimani was not only a revered major general, he was a symbol, he was a celebrity among advocates of the Islamic Revolution, and he was the face of resistance against the imperialism, against the US, and he was considered to be the leader of Iran's Shia Kharsand movement in the region. As we speak, Iranian political elites have gathered in very huge, famous mosque in Tehran to mourn his death, and because when he was attacked, his son-in-law was also with him, and also his advisor Mehdi al-Muhandis, who is a very famous militia commander as well. So the regime supporters who are mainly recruited in religious and state institutions are called upon to take to the streets, and they have shaped the scenes that we are now seeing in different media. And is also arranging to orchestrate a grand ceremony which will be somehow a show of power and resolution of the regime in the face of the US and its opponents in the region. However, I must say that we don't really witness that many spontaneous or grassroots movements to mourn his death, and it appears to be more a orchestration by the regime supporters. Because when the news came out last night, it was all the media, social media, and different coverages of news bulletins were swept by these news. Different groups in Iran respond differently to this matter, but surely we see so many people trying, mainly, like I said, supporters of the regime, trying to take this opportunity to show their resolution. That's about it.
Right, Maral. Thanks very much indeed for joining us and sharing your thoughts on, of course, those spontaneous protests that are taking place against the killing of General Soleimani in Iran. And now joining us is Reza Khasteh, who is also a journalist from Tehran, on the phone line. And Reza, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Now, what happens next in this relationship between the United States and Iran? This is a clear escalation. Is a rapprochement even possible at this point?
Hi, it's my pleasure to be with you. Actually, the assassination of General Soleimani has been so tragic for Iran that a limited attack, I guess, does not seem enough for the country, for the Islamic Republic. I guess General Soleimani was not just a prominent military commander or a senior general. I guess in the Iranian politics, General Soleimani was as high-ranking as the country's president, the second in command of the country after the supreme leader. So I believe a limited attack on the U.S. bases in the region would not suffice. And I believe if there is any revenge and retaliation as promised by the country's top officials today, we should expect a much more severe attack.
Okay, that's a worrisome sign that we can expect more attacks. Maral Golampur is still with us, and Maral, I want to go back to the point of what sort of effort or role can the other major nations in the world play at this moment, considering Russia, China, everybody is actually looking at this very closely.
Well, as already mentioned, Adel Abdul Mahdi, Prime Minister, condemned this action and warned that this could be beginning of a war. And since the news have emerged from a Shia news agency, we have seen, not only Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei condemning this matter, but also Hassan Nasrallah, who is the major Lebanese political leader, and also Muqtada Sadr, and from various factions of the religious and diplomatic groups in Iraq, and also in different other areas, just showing concern about how this could escalate and result in a retaliation. So I think, there are talks about China and Russia bailing out Iran on various issues. This definitely will be a difficult call. Maybe they weren't really prepared for this issue, at least not at this time. Maybe it was something that was expected to happen at a later stage, at least after the presidential elections in the US. But now that it has happened, everyone just calling for Iran and the US to restrain themselves, trying to de-escalate the situation. But we really need to see what can happen. I don't really think that there are so many various scenarios. It's either going to escalate into a war, or it would affect the presumed negotiations that is some believe that there is currently going on between Iran and the US behind closed doors.
Also joining us on the phone line is Kanbar Naderi, journalist again from Tehran. And Mr. Naderi, now as we've been talking about the fallout of this, what does this loss really mean for Iran? You know, the fact that General Soleimani was the points person for Iran in all of the Middle East and in a kind of a regional points person for Iran. This is a significant loss for Iran.
It is it's a huge loss because he was celebrated for being at the forefront of the real war on terrorism and extremism, not just in Iraq, but in Syria, Yemen, and of course, in Afghanistan. I mean, people loved him. He was the figure that showed to the international community that actually when the whole world looked the other way, led the effort to defeat the terrorist group of Daesh in Iraq and Syria. I mean, he paid a heavy price for that. I think what we have seen here so far is that desperate men do desperate things at desperate times. America has lost Iraq, Syria, and Yemen, and it is now trying to take it out on a top Iranian commander. But they should keep in mind that these countries belong to themselves. They don't belong to Iran, they don't belong to the United States or any other country. We should respect their sovereignty and come to our senses that occupation, terrorism, and military adventures in these parts of the world is not the way forward. It goes against the UN Charter and, of course, international law. But as your distinguished guest makes absolutely clear, escalation is not the way forward. Many other people are going to lose their lives unless we find some cool heads in the room that have come to their senses that talking to each other and sorting out the differences through dialogue is the way forward. We need that to happen, and we need other stakeholders like Russia, India, China to also talk to the Iranian government officials and, of course, the U.S. government officials and make them understand that the international community is not willing to take their military adventures lightly. They should realize that this is not just about Iran and the United States. This is about regional peace and international security.
Right.
They better respect this kind of, mentality, that mindset that exists among the international civil society right now.
Right. Also on the phone line is Reza Khaste, who continues to be with us. And Reza, now the U.S. of course has held General Soleimani responsible for the attack on the U.S. embassy in Iraq, among other attacks in the past. How would you respond to that? The fact that General Soleimani was considered, the Quds was considered a terror organization by the United States.
Well, General Soleimani is the commander of Iranian resistance forces, which backed the Iraqi Popular Mobilization Forces. These Iraqi Popular Forces are part of the Iraqi society, part of the Iraqi parliament, and an official organization in the country's constitution. There are a lot of hatred towards the U.S. among Iraqi people. So we cannot blame someone like the martyr General Soleimani for the attack on the U.S. embassy. Of course, the PMU, the Popular Forces, were behind the attack, but we could also trace Muqtada Sadr, the prominent Iraqi cleric, for these attacks, these anti-U.S. sentiments. So this is not just Soleimani who was against the U.S. in Iraq or against the positions of the U.S. Following the U.S. occupation of Iraq, there have been many groups in the Arab country who are opposed to the U.S. presence and have been attacking the U.S. interests in the country. So we cannot just limit it to an Iranian commander there.
Mm-hmm. And Kanbar Naderi, going back to your point about how this cannot escalate further because lives would be lost and other players must be included in the conversations going forward. But is there any scope or space left for those conversations or those mediations anymore?
Of course there isn't, because the Trump administration thinks that it is exceptional to international rule of law. They think that they can get away with anything, even unilateral sanctions and restrictions, and an economic warfare against Iran, which, by the way, goes against the Charter of the United Nations. And no country on the earth is supporting that kind of behavior. So, I mean, for any kind of dialogue, the U.S. government should realize that it is not an exceptional, part of the international civil society. Iran also should come to this kind of understanding, because we have had enough of this kind of confrontation that has been, by the way, going on for 40 years, not just over the past 20 years or so. 40 years, and nobody has benefited. This is a lose-lose situation for both Iran and the United States. They need to realize that the only way forward is dialogue, because look what has happened. They didn't talk to each other, and the economic warfare has already escalated to a military war. Who knows what's going to happen next? Who knows whether we might see some kind of conflict and confrontation between these two forces? We should avoid that, and for that to happen, we need no other choice but to get other stakeholders on board and ask them to do some kind of mediation between these two arch rivals. That is the only way. That is the only solution. We need to de-escalate, because if we don't de-escalate, the whole world is going to pay through the nose.
Right. Ganbar Naderi, well, thanks very much for that. Also with us, as I said, is Reza. Now, my final question to you, Reza, is that, we also saw some celebrations in Iraq after the news of General Soleimani came out, and also the fact that the US and many other countries blame General Soleimani for supporting the Al-Qaeda, the Hamas, the Hezbollah. So there were real concerns that he was pushing an agenda against the Western nations. Reza.
These concerns are there, but I don't think the U.S. can push its agenda in the way it wants for now, because it now must be expecting the Iranian response, and all their forces are going to be withdrawn from not just the Arab country, but perhaps from the entire region. And I guess in the near future, we should be expecting the Iranian response, not anything on the U.S. agenda and policy.
Right. Reza Khasteh and Ganbar Naderi, as well as Maral Golampur, thanks very much indeed for all joining us and sharing your thoughts on what this escalation means for regional politics, for Iran and the United States, and of course for the world at large. Clearly an escalation that has gone beyond what was expected in the last few months. Thanks very much for joining us.